Hey there, VBATs. I see you driving.
You don't hear me at all?
I can hear you.
Okay, now still?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Bluetooth wasn't playing nice the first time. Okay.
All right, Jesse, I will get that sorted out here for you. If anyone else cannot get your audio working, go ahead and give me a hand rate or leave a hand up and I'll get it fixed in a second here.
I think Zoom did this recent change where it says you've been muted by the host or something like that. There's disabled unmuting, but it's only because there's now this like obscure checkbox that you have to click to say you're okay being recorded. So look for an okay checkbox in the top sometimes on the desktop version, or at least it was on Linux. And if you click OK, then suddenly you can unmute yourself, but it's apparently new this week. There you go.
You win. You win.
Nice.
Yep. It completely faded into the background. I didn't even see it.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for that tip,
pretty.
VBATs, because that's been hitting a lot of people.
It's a, you know, it's a nice feature when you just like join a call and it's like you can't unmute yourself.
Well, it also is like in the settings of the, like as the host, you can modify all these things. But yeah, that's, you nailed it, man. Thank you. Brandon, I think all last week I must have just had that banner up above and I didn't even notice it.
Probably, but
right,
I think
cool.
I've also noticed when people said they had the issue, I could go in and manually say, try to unmute that person claiming the host. And so that's what I was just getting ready to do. So if that's the
Well, thank
fix,
you, everybody.
I know that's been breaking other meetups, so I will, or meetings, so I will re-share that tip to other people. All right, so it is 5 after. I will do the quick announcement first, which is from Amy, which is that we do have space at KubeCon Paris. So it's going to be Friday afternoon, says 2 to 4 p.m. their time, which is going to hopefully be somewhat friendly to the rest of anybody that might be trying to join remote from the US. So if you have any agenda items, it would be good to throw that on the list. And I suspect we'll probably fill it out as it gets closer. If anybody is going to be there in person, it might be good to get somewhat of a head count, know who's going to be there and who wouldn't. And otherwise, I think that's just kind of the big announcement. Sound good to folks? All right. Administrative out of the way. I think a lot of people here want to talk about, Mike, you had some comments there on the RC4. So I think Jesse put it on the agenda, but I think a lot of us want to just work through that and see if we can get this solidified out there so we can get a GA release.
In some respect, it's differences of opinion, or at least differences of understanding over what some of the verbs mean, like must accept. What does accept mean? And then over in the image spec, we use, other terms that there are also, what is must validate or should validate, or before consumption. What does consumption mean? Is consumption of an image spec, of an image manifest, does consumption of that manifest mean you realize or is it cache it, right? Does it mean you're before running the container, you make sure the digest is valid all the way down the tree? Or does it mean before you store it and act as a registry, right, supplying the API from a cache or a proxy? Is that what it means? Where does what do these verbs mean? It's not really well defined. And when you say must, it takes away that ability of the reader to read into it what it means. When you tell them they have to do something, I think you got to tell them what that thing is. A little better. That's
Even
all.
then, there's a flip side to that coin, right, Mike? Like, even then, you can say, well, if you do say must, right, we must accept it, and you leave it alone, as we always have for the last 8 years or whatever, we don't define it, then we get to decide, right? So there's there's two sides to that coin either way, right?
But before it was, I think most of the language in that kind of area was should. Now we have a must.
So maybe we should just walk through the comments one at a time, because I don't and we probably should do the raised hands thing. I like informality, but I feel like if we talk more, then maybe other people don't feel obliged to. I still have the same thoughts that I had in Chicago, and I don't know that those ever got addressed. What I would like to avoid, unless somebody wants to do it, is to go down the road of what is a DAG and why is it important to us? I think we're all aligned on that, so we could just get right to the meat of the issue. But I guess if anybody wants to go through that, let's do that. But if it's not necessary, I think we can just sidestep it.
And by going through the comments, we're talking list right now, right?
Yeah. Just a suggestion. Obviously, anybody can disagree with me.
I agree with you. Let's get this.
Do I need to
worked out
raise my
and
hand to
get a
agree?
resolution.
I would prefer not. We don't have an official chair. Brandon and I have been talking about this. We don't have an official chair. We just have an incredibly willing and awesome human being that's always willing to keep us going. But we can be informal. And that's you, Brandon, I meant. Yeah, so number one, subject descriptor should be made consistent with the image spec restrictions, DAG requirements. So my kind of observation here is that we have a couple of different ways to look at this. And one of the things that we want to make sure of is that we don't break the model, right? And I feel like that is really what we're talking about. The concern that I have is that we all understand not how the DAG works or why it's important, but what the use case is here. So to be very specific about it, and then I'll kind of shut up and see what other people think. I view a referrer and an image that is a subject as two distinct things in a registry, two different DAGs. Now, it will be possible from a referrer to look at its manifest, see there's a subject, look at that subject descriptor, see that digest, walk it backwards to the subject image, and verify a DAG across the two things. Kind of breaks down a little bit for me because there's N referrers. We could have 5 referrers, and they're not related to each other, right? And it doesn't make a ton of sense to me that I would walk backwards up a tree. So I feel like with an image that has 5 referrers, it's 6 different things in the registry with 6 different DAGs. So that is sort of my fundamental spot where I say, so I don't think we break anything. And that is kind of my conversation point for this. And I'll stop.
So the
Brandon, I think your hand was up first.
Yeah, mine was up next. But I wanted to also give Mike a chance if he had some stuff in there. I have 2 thoughts in there on the DAG, maybe even 3, looking at different parts of the code. And so one is the verification where it says, hey, if you're going to consume content, you should check the digest. I think what that is saying, my reading is that if I pull a blob or I pull a manifest or anything from one of those APIs, and I know the digest of that content, I should verify the content addressability of that content that I pulled. So the digest of the subject field, I don't think you are verifying that content at that point. You may have verified it separately when you were saying,
That's
hey, I
right.
wanted to pull this manifest and then get everything that has a refer to this thing. That would be a different verification point than here when you're
Yep.
looking at the subject field. So I
Agreed.
don't
Agreed.
think that this is blocking us. So
I don't
I
either.
see thumbs ups from Mike there. I feel good seeing a thumbs up from Mike on that one. The other part, I think, is when we're talking about the descriptors themselves, it says that, hey, descriptor here, we have stuff that isn't a DAG, and each of those DAG references is referenced by a descriptor. I don't think we can say the reverse. I don't think we can say every descriptor is a DAG reference specifically from this language. And I think that might be a gotcha point that people have started with an assumption of every time I see something in there that is a descriptor, it must be a DAG. We don't explicitly say that. And we kind of implicitly maybe hint at it, but we don't. So I'm wondering if there's some wiggle room in there where we can say, let's maybe be more clear that just because it's a descriptor doesn't necessarily mean that it is part of the DAG. That if it is a DAG, then it will have a descriptor, but not vice versa. So that's,
Yeah.
and
I
that
think
might
that's
just
a
be
good
one more bullet
clarification.
point here.
Yes, and that, yes. And also look at the title, right? It's content descriptors. Because we only had content descriptors before.
Right.
Now we've got a subject descriptor.
Right. And this
Has
exactly
a little bit different. And you were right on target. It doesn't need to be validated at this point. At some point, in a use case that would be easy to describe, it will need to be validated. I've got an artifact. It's referring to an image. If you're going to take them together, right, as an artifact that describes, for example, an image, and you need to validate the artifact and the image, we've got descriptors, we can do this. Or we can assume that the person who pushed the artifact did do the validation, right? And we can go ahead and check we can check the descriptor, sorry, the digest to make sure that has not been mucked with. Somebody didn't edit the SBOM and then just refer to something and now it's still okay because we're not validating that image for this SBOM, right?
But to Jesse's point, when he was first starting, his comment was along the lines of, we've got separate things. We're walking the tree in that certain order where we pull the image, then we pull the different refers to that image and verify each of those. You're going to verify the digest of that subject field when you pull the image before you ever even query the refers to that image. So that subject field, you never verify it from the subject field. You verified it when you pulled that manifest for the image itself.
Yes. And I have a digest for the artifact as well. And that digest is referring to a specific digest via the weak reference. So at that point, when I'm validating the artifact, I'm also validating, because I'm also validating the image, I'm validating them together, right? Together, that use case is valid now. The artifact has the right digest that I expected, and it includes a digest via weak reference for the image for which it existed in the first place. In that use case, then validation works. So what I meant earlier with respect to the verbs is they need to be applied to a point in time, as you said, Brian, to explain when that validation should exist. And in this case, for content descriptors, we know what is meant here, right? Before you go ahead and start a container, right? Before you assume that the image is valid, is what these descriptors meant. And in the other case, for a subject descriptor, said validation would be to make sure that the pairing of the artifact to that image is valid.
Yeah. Yes. I think if I can with my hand now. So I go back to Brandon's point. I think you spoke from like the client perspective. I just want for posterity and for like the full context, consumption, right? What does consumption mean? I think for a registry, consumption means storing it in persistent store, right? It's consuming it off the wire and storing it somewhere. And maybe we write this down somewhere, or maybe it's just implied still, but I think for a client, it's like before you do something with it, you read it off the wire, you verify it. For a registry to consume it, you read it off the wire and you verify it before you store it, right? And then two, if it's may or must, and I've said this before, like as a registry implementer, I don't care. Like I don't think Michael's on the call too. I think ECR doesn't really care because we will do what is right for the registry implementation and our customers, like the users of that. And so, we could say, okay, well, we must accept it. So we'll take it off the wire and we'll persistently store it after we verify it, right? Like because there's a manifest. And then it'll hang out for a while. And it may or may not have a subject that exists. And after, some number of time, we might garbage collect it because it doesn't have any use. It doesn't have a purpose, right? So you can push 1,000 SBOMs to an image. And if you ever push the image, remember, we're going to go delete all those 1,000 SBOMs or not, right? That's an implementation detail. Maybe they just stay there forever and that's fine too. And so I think for us to say must, we're okay. And then it's may, well, or should, whatever, like we're also fine there. We're going to do exactly the same thing. So this is, to me, the addition of must was not so much pointing at a registry implementation enforcement. It's more a client benefit. To say must, it means that a client doesn't have to have special logic to say, oh, I'm going to push this thing. Oh, well, in that registry, I can't. Right. So now you have all these special cases, this if and that. So I think it's just a client benefit to say must, because then a client can have consistent behavior. And then it decides what to do to interact appropriately with the product or project that is underlying that relationship. To say ECR may behave a certain way and ACR behaves a different way and Harbor behaves a different way. That's just how these work, right? So you would say then, my user of my client, when you push to ECR, know that if you don't later push the subject image, it's going to get garbage collected. It will disappear. So that's an ephemeral store, right? And do we have to put that in the spec? Maybe, but we've never put things like that in the spec before. So that's kind of like, I think from both sides where we didn't really have an opinion, but I think the must hang up was really on the client. Anyway, I could just keep going, so I'm going to stop now and I'll raise my hand again if I have more.
Yeah, as I've been playing around with this, I've tried implementing a little bit of this in a registry, and my treatment of refers has been the exact same as my treatment of layers and manifest. So if I push a layer, there is a grace period before I delete that layer, giving someone a chance to push the image that refers to that layer after the fact. So I know the content may come eventually. And so there is that time frame where, yeah, you pushed a blob, nothing referred to that blob. Some of my garbage collected. Yeah, that I do that with layers. I do that with manifest if it's contained within a multi-platform manifest list. You might push that manifest list, the index later on, and that's okay that there's nothing that refers to it yet. There's no tag that's pointing to it yet, knowing that something may be pushed later on that's going to do that. And so it's the same thing for me with a refer where I can push the refer. And if a registry wants to treat that with a garbage collection, then the treatment of that would be the same treatment that they have with layers and with dangling manifest. So that was the one point I had there. Sajay, go ahead.
I just wanted to probably like bring in a point that Mike and I have been discussing. I think we agree that subject is a weak reference or a descriptor. The one thing that we are missing, and I think this might be the point that Mike is trying to say, and correct me, Mike, if I'm wrong, the fact that the artifact manifest includes the subject descriptor as a DAG is like that construct of that, the digest of that specific artifact manifest is computed using the layers and the subject manifest, right? And that portion of the DAG is important. Like when you verify the SBOM or the signature or whatever that artifact manifest is, it also means that the digest of that content is kind of included in that. I think that might be the construct that we're missing in the image spec. And if we can, instead of an OCI content descriptor, add a line saying that the subject descriptor is in a similar bucket, that might clarify is what I gleaned from the discussions early on. So Mike, is that where you want to head? Just kind of like along with OCI content descriptors, add a line for subject descriptor saying that this is something like a weak reference, but it's also a part of the artifact manifest.
Yes, at least at a certain point in time when it's consumed together with its subject with its weak referenced image. Yes.
Is it not enough that that's implied? Like I feel like it's a digest value. When you have an artifact manifest, there's a subject entrance, there's a content descriptor, there's a digest. I go look it up. It's not there. There's nothing to verify. If it is there in a registry, it implies it is already verified content. For us to accept that subject image, we've already done the work of processing that DAG and verifying that content.
It is, but the spec says the opposite, even if it does not exist.
No, that's what, yeah, 100%.
It says it says if you read it literally, it says you must accept even if it doesn't exist.
Yep. Sorry, that's one of the 4 scenarios of server and client. It exists or it doesn't. What I was saying, I guess, is if there is a digest that exists, it refers to content that is already verified.
Right. I think the point is it does not exist or is not pushed to the server is kind of the only aspect here. The manifest was already created and verified. So it does exist, but it exists somewhere. Like it might exist in the OCI layout or it might exist on a client. I think that's where people are kind of like, maybe that's the point is, how do we break this logjam? Is it more about just calling out, rephrasing that it must accept and the subject may not have been pushed to the distribution side is probably an easier small one-liner fix rather than I mean that's one part where it kind of makes it consistent that it is still a part of the DAG in some way, but it's not, but the server need not have that, and it's up to the client.
I think it already says that, right? Like you must accept something that doesn't exist. That thing might not exist. Seems a little redundant.
No, I think.
What does that mean? Yeah, does it mean made up or does it mean
Yeah?
I think it means who cares, right? Like I could literally put bad cafe in there. That's fine. It doesn't exist, right? And if it does exist, it is verified content.
Yeah.
So
No,
I
and
think
like you
that's
said
what I'm
earlier,
saying is that
it
like
can
we
be then
can,
garbage collected, but it doesn't. We don't talk about garbage collection. That's always been something we left out, right?
I think I like that. I mean, I don't really want to, I
I
don't
do
think
too. I'm
that
not
this,
trying to add that.
yeah.
That's why it's just what
Yeah,
does
it's
must
like,
accept mean?
it's like, does the PCI specification indicate you should free your memory after you've written to a buffer? I don't think so. So like, yeah, I think I want to keep it that way. I would want us to.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we could get tangled up in, and I think we just did, is the semantics around how to word this properly. I think my suggestion here is we don't. Like, I would not want to further clarify because I think it becomes more confusing. If we look at the two specs in total and we understand them fluently, and we agree that the subject descriptor is a new sort of descriptor that's really a reference relationship, then we can say, if there is a subject descriptor and there is a data manifest, and I'm a registry, we'll start with registry, and there's a digest value in that subject descriptor, I should verify that it is valid content or expect that it might not be, right? Because it is not present. Not because it is present and I do the work to verify the DAG and it fails and it's invalid content, right? So that's sort of that part. Well, I mean, it's not really a shrug, right? Because it is, the spec already says that if I have stored something in the content addressable store by this digest, then by the nature of existing as an immutable piece of storage that's been stored, it is a valid digest. I've already verified that DAG. I've already done that. You've pushed a bunch of layers, then you gave me a manifest, and I said, what's in there? Oh, it's all these digests that already exist. Let me go compute that. We're good to go. So later you push something, or before then you push something that refers to it. It either doesn't exist or it is valid. Right? That's sort of the state of that's just sort of the truth of that situation. So I think if we agree that it's a reference relationship, I think we have cleared the logjam. I think.
Do we want to document that in the image spec on each of the subject descriptors? What would make Mike happy?
I don't know, he just nodded. He said, we cleared the logjam. He nodded. He looks happy. Look at him, he's smiling.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I'm trying to break with the.
Yeah.
What do these verbs mean? Okay, when we say must accept, what Jesse said earlier, I think it's what we all agree, right?
Yeah.
Must accept means for that point in time. It doesn't mean permanently store artifacts that are 50 gigabytes long, right? Because it's an entire container image that has a weak subject reference to some other manifest. I don't think that's what it means, right? I really don't.
Yeah.
So we've all got some expectations of what it must accept means. And before it was should with validation. Now it doesn't, I just need a couple of words here and there, image and distribution, that makes it a little bit of a weaker declaration, right? I get you want to push an artifact before the image has been pushed, or even if the image is remote and the client will manage the verification of both. That's fine. I don't think there's that. I don't have a problem with that. I'm having a problem with the spec saying one thing in image spec for a content descriptor, not defining what a subject descriptor is, and then over in the distribution spec saying you must accept it. I'm not. We haven't written down the rule, but we all agree what it is. If that makes sense.
Okay. I had raised my hand just because I'm trying to encourage other people to talk, but I'm going to speak again. I like that. I think you just summarized really well something that I think everybody would agree with. And I didn't hear that there is a logical flaw in the specification, the 1.1 RC4 specification. It's just that it could be better. It could be more clear, but there's no untruth to it. So if you agree with that, then I would say maintainers have a question. Can we put a 1.2 request in to tighten up that language and make it more clear, or is it something we really need to see in 1.1? Because to me, you're calling out 1.0 deficiencies. We never really clearly defined these verbs very well.
We didn't have
and
subject descriptors. We only had
well,
context.
sure, but
And in
still,
that
what does
context,
consume? What does
there was an
consume
issue
mean?
with index. There was an issue with indexes, and that's why indexes were made. That's why it went from must to should language, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
indexes might be stored at some other time and may refer to images that maybe some registry doesn't want to validate the index against a full DAG with index for platforms against all of the images that are referred, right? Maybe they'll delete a platform and leave the reference or something. So we wanted to leave it more flexible is what I'm hearing from John. I wasn't there at the time when that decision was made. Maybe Vince remembers.
So I just want to ask if we change some wording here. Right now, when the subject is saying it's going to be an optional property specifying a descriptor of another manifest, can we clarify this next sentence and just say, I threw it in the chat, this value defines a loose relationship to a separate DAG, comma, used by the referrers API, yada, yada.
I like it.
Perfect.
Yeah, I like it.
That gives me exactly what I was looking for. It decouple. It makes it consistent with what we're doing in the distribution API. Over time, I'd like to also on the distribution side explain the verification validation is still capable in the registries and the caches on the clients, but that they must initially accept that some maybe a half a phrase is all I need, right? And then I'm good with it. More detail, yeah, I agree. 1.2, just enough wiggle room that you're not going to get in trouble if you're an OCI registry and you don't permanently accept these artifacts that are weakly pointing to images that aren't validated by the
Right.
You know.
I think since we don't define garbage collection, we've got a whole lot of wiggle room there because registries can implement garbage collection any way they want to, and
Or not.
they're within the
Yep.
spec doing that.
And like I said at the top, I prefer that. Fully, very ready to have a conversation about it and sort of pros and cons, but seems like a can of worms that would be worthy of more time. Which is, I think, why I'm wondering if these tightenings and clarifications and improvements generally in language are good candidates for 1.2 or if they are blockers for 1.1. It's hard. We don't do a lot of minor releases. I think like Brandon and I were also looking at this, like way back when we started OCI, we were like, major releases are a big deal. Here's the process by which you do them. And yeah, specs should do minor releases when needed. Like, but we don't do a lot of minor releases. We just don't,
No,
and so it's been
I
like,
might be
yeah,
waiting 3 years before we figure this
Yeah.
use case out.
Jesse, that was called a bunch of people being burned out and just punting. I can't solve that problem now.
were we
Please, somebody
burned
in the
out that
future
long
solve.
ago? Were we burned out that long ago? Come on, it only took 14 months to do runtime, right? It was. I don't know. Was it that? Was it that
We're
long?
all
Was it
burned
what?
out? Always
It
have.
was.
Were. This is 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, I
like
was there.
the
Yes, you were.
yeah. I think that was literally a punt that we were like, I can't fathom how to do iterative development on this. Like, is it feature flags or is it SimVer? And we'll figure that out in the future.
Yeah.
And so I think we caused that problem ourselves, but it doesn't help your blocking a current release or not. Question.
Yeah, I only meant to bring that up in that, like, I don't think we foresaw minor releases being a huge contention point. But we just don't do them a lot, so it feels like a big deal. I want it to be correct. And so I think what I'm asking is we've agreed that it's logically correct, but it could be improved on clarity. Does that feel like a thing that we should push out a little bit more and do this for 1.1? Or is that something like we want to overhaul a lot of verbs and nouns and we should make that a 1.2 project?
I would push the big overhaul to a 1.2, but I'm hoping that just the one sentence, half a sentence change that we were just talking about, if we can get that merged this week and that makes Mike happy with at least this one issue, then I think we can
It
do a
helps
1.2.
clarify. It helps clarify this relation because the word indicates a relationship. We put that there intentionally. What kind of relationship? Well, yeah, you just put referring in there and that helps.
Yeah. And I think to exactly what Sajay's saying in the comments, do this minor little tweak here, get that in there, and then
Yep.
save any other more significant clarification to a 1.2 later on. I think I'm on that path. Anybody else feel otherwise? Mike, I saw kind of like a shrug from you. You seem comfortable.
I think you need a change on both sides, but yes. What is a subject
Yeah.
descriptor? Why is
It does
how
make
is it different
sense.
than a contact descriptor?
Yep.
Minor sentence here, there is all you need, I believe, just to suggest the implication, what we're talking about here that it implies, right? And then on the same thing on that must, where you must accept, just have to indicate there that it implies initially, not permanently.
Not permanently. So
Let's
you're saying
say-
the garbage collection is the thing you're worried about? You want to make sure that's
No,
still
no, it's not just it. The thing I'm worried about is from an API perspective, this context of I've got an artifact and it weakly refers to an image and I'm using them together for a solution. But I'm saying I must accept the artifact. And I don't know what that means exactly. It doesn't have to be clear. If it's loose, then I don't have to worry about it. If it's a tight definition that you must accept it for all time, I don't think that's what it means because Jesse's right.
Yeah.
It's
And I
not
think
for all
that would
time.
be,
It isn't.
that's the point with Derek I was trying to make, and we got caught up in the DAG and how it works. And I'm like, I know,
Yeah.
but must or may for a registry, we don't really care. We'll just do what we need to do. Clients get benefit or not out of this, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was
we gotta keep
definitely
rolling.
done for an aid on the client side that they can just push the artifacts to one, push the images to another, have a weak reference for the digest when they're brought back together again on the client for use of the artifact and that image together.
Yeah.
We understand why, but that we didn't say it. So it just needs to be a little bit looser, right? I mean, you could even say until used or consumed, until the artifact and the image are consumed. Then you've got the same language that you had before in the image spec. Right now, we don't say what it must accept means. Not a lot of detail because I don't want it to be complex or
It
anything
does
like
make sense
that.
though. It does make sense that if we make this little tweak to image, that we make another tweak in distribution to make it a little more clear.
Just a small.
And it almost, Brandon, almost this kind of that similar wording, I think, here in this first sentence. Or maybe it gets run on a little bit, but just saying like, due to that content descriptor representing a referential relationship.
Yes.
This is the reason you would,
Validate.
put, yeah.
Yes, exactly, Jesse. That's all.
Yeah. Which implies again,
So
like
even until consumption or until validation of the relationship is executed by a client or whatever you want to say there. Just one little nit is all I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So I'm having a hard time with until validation by a client because I don't know what that means. You're using verbs I don't know what they
Until
mean.
consumed. You keep the same terms until consumed.
What does consume mean? Does that mean that as soon as a client queries the refers API, that it's now there? Like I'm trying to follow.
I'm saying
Well,
when you consume an artifact and its image together in any use case, there should be validation of the artifact and that relationship. But that's a should, not a must. Right? If you got an SBOM, it's got a weak reference, you've got a digest against that SBOM, you should validate the digest. And when you do that, because of that weak reference, right, it's got a value inside of the artifact, boom, you're done. Because you've got the image too. It's no longer a weak reference, now a strong reference, because I'm doing a use case in Kubernetes. Kubernetes
Brandon, I think-
validate the SBOM. Yeah.
That's a
But
client
the-
side thing, right? So back on
client
the
side.
registry side. So I think, Brandon, to answer your question, like I think you had said, if I query the referrers API, right? Like, so if you're querying the referrers API, you have a reference to the subject image. So again, it's one of those 4 scenarios. You're going to get either a 404 or you're going to get a response, right? That's validated content or it doesn't exist. There is no possible way for that to be content that exists that is not validated, verified, whatever verb we want to use, right? So I think that little trap that you were thinking there logically that I saw you, like, I don't think it is a problem.
I'm not fully following, but Sajay's got his hand up. He might be thinking the same stuff I'm thinking. Go ahead, Sajay.
If you scroll to the pull section, the pulling of a manifest indicates that the content blobs need to be uploaded and things like that. I think this is where we can add saying that the subject descriptor need not exist when you get the manifest, because if you want to validate it, you can't, because it might just not be there in the registry. There is a section here that says the blobs need to exist, has to be uploaded in the manifest. So it's more about the pull consumption part rather than the referrers API, I'm thinking.
Yeah. And I just, in case, look, if somebody disagrees with me, but I just want to keep saying this until we all kind of like are like, we stop saying sort of that, like, if you want to verify it, like I think my point is if you have a digest value and a subject content descriptor or subject descriptor, sorry, if you have a digest value set and a subject descriptor, it points to something that either exists or it doesn't. If it exists, it's already verified. If it's in persistent store, in the registry. So I really want to, if we can, either somebody disagree with me and tell me I'm wrong, or stop working on the additional logical construct of, in case you want to verify that thing that already exists. Because if it's in the registry and persistent store, it already is verified. It's immutable content, and it's a SHA-256 digest that describes it. So I'm asserting that we shouldn't have to clarify that.
I'm also in agreement that adding the verification construct was going to be a lot of time. It's going to consume a lot of time, but we can at least clarify that the subject descriptor might not exist. That might be, and it's a loose relationship. Those are the 2 things that we can make sure that they align in both cases. So in the image spec, we say the relationship is loose, and in the distribution spec, we say that in the pull workflow, the content might not exist because it's a loose relationship. Those 2 statements might just close the loop, and maybe Mike will be okay with that.
Yeah, I think I hate to say in the same repository, but it may not exist in the repository from which you retrieve the refers.
Yeah, because blob mounts can be cross repository. So we do have scenarios of cross repository. So I don't want to get there.
Yeah. So it's sort of it may not exist there. But it may be somewhere else, and it's up to the client in that particular case to do the verification before using the image and the artifact on the pull or on the refers request. Same thing. There's an implied understanding that you're gonna validate, right, the artifacts that you got from the refers request and their weak subject references. weird part is you might have asked for all the artifacts that are pointing to an image that doesn't exist in the registry. Mind blown.
I mean, we're going to be doing that actually, right? We're going to
Yeah.
be storing SBOMs in a different registry, and we want to have this thing. So,
So
but
same thing. It's a
that's
point
an
in time.
implementation. It's an
It's a point.
implementation.
We have point in time things, both for the registry and for the client, for when they believe that together these things are actually valid. It would be interesting if, do we have in the refers API that you have to return even if that image doesn't exist in your registry? Just asking. Can of worms.
I'm also wondering if we want to adjust the language for the next one where it says a registry may reject, to limit this to descriptors within the DAG. So with descriptors, just kind of like qualify that saying within the DAG. And since we specify the subject is not part of the DAG, that pulls that outside of the field.
So you got two sort of points there in that one statement, right? One meaning a image manifest that has a subject reference. Is that different than an artifact manifest that has a subject reference? No, same thing. So there are
Only
weak
images,
references
one
in
media
both.
type. We already shot that one in the head and brought it behind a barn. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Just no, sorry,
we got
not trying
subjects
to
on
open
everything.
that can of
Everything's
worms.
an image still. Yeah. Yeah, but the same thing, right? Whether regardless of artifact type is what we're saying, right? Regardless of artifact type, this behaves the same way. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Difference being if it's a manifest in an image that has a weak reference, that is in the DAG. Maybe not the weak reference because it could be something outside, but the manifest itself is in the DAG. So the fact you're verifying all the way up the chain in that case.
Yes, but that's just the use case that I found very odd. Right. Like
It
I
is.
have
It is.
one of n refers that I'd like to walk the DAG all the way back up to the subject image manifest. Like, why would you do that? But okay, go for it, champ. I think you could, yeah. But like I could have, an SBOM, a picture of a cat, a signature, a scan result, all pointing at an image. There really isn't that walk the DAG use case. It's not clear to me. But yes, you can.
I can think of some related to pods, but that's another conversation.
I agree with Sajay. I would leave it. It feels like that could be part of a 1.2 endeavor to be like, hey, let's go define all the things better and maybe have some pictures and stuff. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, at most, I
wouldn't
think
want to do
here
that,
you could say content descriptor on that second sentence. Instead of descriptor, say content descriptor. Eventually, because subject descriptor is different, we probably need to be more, when we say descriptor, do we mean both? Is sort of a conversation.
Again, I think that's a must. Like if it's a content descriptor, in an image manifest or in an artifact manifest, which is still an image, you have a content descriptor with a digest, and that digest isn't there to verify, you cannot do that. That is a must not do.
So
right, registry when
the spec says
consuming
may, and it's always said may, but every registry is implemented just about as a must across the board. But just for posterity, we've always said may on that one. In practice, not.
Yeah, that's going to be a 2.0 to
That's-
make that a must. Let's not get there. It's a minefield.
I thought this was just in reference to other descriptors.
No, it's
Shoot, I've never read that
all
that
of
way.
the-
Holy
all
smokes,
the
that's
layers,
that's kind of a bug,
the-
you guys.
the
Okay.
child manifest, everything else has always been a may.
Cool.
And there are people that want to use this because they want to push sparse manifest. They want to push a manifest for the index
Yes.
and not push the 6
Well, they
platforms they
can.
aren't currently deploying in their local environment to their
can.
registry.
Yep. Let's
Hey,
forget I
so-
said anything in the last 45 seconds.
The sparse manifest is kind of useful. Like imagine taking a large
It
image,
is.
then you have to scan Windows and Linux and ARM and 50 different platforms. It just doesn't make sense in all cases. So,
Yeah.
but it does exist somewhere else. I think that's the point that
It
Mike.
does. And in implementation as well. So yes, I think, yeah, we could call, yeah, I think it's fine the way it is then, is with descriptors.
One thing we might be able to do here is just put a carriage turn line feed after in either order. Right now, when you read the two sentences together, it sort of feels like you were talking about the same thing, but you weren't, right? It switches context.
We were somewhat grouping them together just because they were both talking about accepting
Yeah.
the manifest, whether it was allowed to be uploaded. If we clarify this first one anymore, I think we're probably at a point this paragraph's getting a bit long and wouldn't hurt to
It's getting a bit
separate.
long. Yeah, the second sentence was originally there and talking about just content, not
Yeah.
regular images, not artifacts.
So I'm still looking for what phrase to change, edit, like the actual text we want to add here to this. And I
You
wanna make sure
literally
that
could say
what
a
we-
registry must initially accept would be enough for me.
okay.
Initially.
Initially, implying what we've been talking about. It's a point in time statement.
And just to be clear, because this happens in policy language sometimes, we all get trapped. I just want to be clear for the user experience on the client side. Why is there still value if we say must accept, must initially accept? And I can turn around 1 second later and GC that. Why is there value? Because the client won't fail, right?
Yes.
Outright. It will have a odd user experience. At which point the client implementer can say, yeah, go talk to ECR. I don't know why they're doing that. Versus your code is broken, right? And it just fails, right? I think that that's why there's still value here. And of course, ECR will not delete it in 1 second. I don't mean to apply that. I'm just saying the registry, like what you go talk to ACR, go talk to Sajay, see why it's doing that. I don't know why. I just wrote reg client and it's here, right? It works.
I'm sending everybody a Sajay because he's the best person to work with for any of this stuff.
1 hour.
Sorry, wait. I mean, I love Sajay too, but like, wait, what? Where does that put the rest of us? It's just not as
I
good as
figured
Sajay.
if we we're going
That's
to pick
the
on
new
Sajay, I
scale.
was trying to pick on him politely.
All right. Well, let's pick on him by elevating him.
Listen,
I love
Jesse,
that.
we don't make the rules. You just have to deal with it. I'm sorry.
I'm down. Sajay for president. I'm good.
I'm just trying to build business here, Mike. We just need your approval. So let's make sure that things just kind of like the sentences appear, as long as people are happy. But what I'll do is I'll definitely create a follow-up issue for 1.2 for
Yeah.
clarification and put that in the milestone. That's something we can definitely do because I think there's
That's
more.
good.
And also just want to make sure it's obvious. I don't believe we should steamroll the other votes. I'd like to make sure we have a good conversation with all the maintainers before we go forward with and
I
this
think
is
you,
for
just to
one-
be clear, nobody wants to steamroll, but I think you were the last one with questions or concerns. Everybody
No.
else voted.
No,
Everybody else
don't
voted.
think
We
so.
saw it.
We
That's for
voted
them to say.
approve a release candidate together in unanimity.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Right.
We didn't vote to approve a release yet.
That's another vote. That's a separate vote.
That's a separate vote. Yeah.
Right. So I guess that's my question. So Sajay,
Yeah,
thank
my
you.
provisional was a point in time statement with respect to
Fine.
before we actually pushed, a release. Let's fix
That works. No, that works. But to kind of following on Sajay's spirit here of like, let's cut to the business, right? So we worked through this. I think it's in good shape. Sajay, thank you. From here, is there a mechanism to move right to a GA with like this, including this one issue, or do we have to go to another RC? No, because not to jam it through, but to start that conversation. I
Yes.
want to know if people held back concerns on an RC, why would they come out in GA, and let's get them out soon, because I don't want to do this for another 6 months. Right. So let's do that. Like,
it would be good for us to have a plan for what type of change we're willing to accept in 1.1.1 or 1.2 with respect to tightening of the use cases, if necessary, to allow for verification validation at the server, right, at the registry or a cache client.
So Mike, that's a good idea. We didn't think of a minor patch. If you wanted to add the clarification, that's okay. We've done that for
Could
the
do that.
media type, right? And that's actually a pretty big minor patch to
Yeah.
enforce media type. I think that's okay. I think Jesse's question is kind of important to answer here, which is, do we need yet another RC and delay, or can this be part of the GA, something we should maybe at least talk and agree on, without having to go through a full vote cycle and then get the approvals again? At least let's talk about it. I think it's important.
Yeah.
I believe in our releases, the stuff we called out in this, major releases must go through this whole process, minor and
Minors are-
patch as needed. So there's nothing that says we have to go through a long RC and everything for a minor or patch release. We can make our decision, say we're
Which includes-
making these couple small tweaks,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
push for
Yeah.
the GA vote.
So, so Derek's open issue 459, we could probably push that to a 1.1 patch as opposed to a 1.2 release cycle
The-
kind of.
The next release, whatever it makes sense. I would say his, when you're starting to add new APIs, I would feel like that's getting into a new feature, and so that would probably
That's
be a
more than
minor.
a patch. I think so too.
That can still be a minor release.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's a minor, but not a patch. It's not micro, is what we were agreeing on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clarifications can be patches.
Yes.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
we're not talking a major release, we're not talking a patch, but I think, yeah, his changes can fit in a minor.
Okay, so what I don't know, I don't want to answer for everybody, but I feel like we are at a point where even if we have this change, we don't have to go through a full RC cycle is a possibility, at least reading the current thing, right? You still have to gather votes for distribution and for image spec and hopefully cut
But
again.
we can move, but we
Again.
can, I think we can go to the next phase with that is what I think you all are agreeing on. I'm not a maintainer, I don't know.
Does anybody else want to make the PRs, or should I go ahead and knock them out this afternoon? All right, I'm going to take the silences. I'll go ahead and knock these two out. The reason I was throwing the text in the chat was so I can go back and pull this chat later on, make sure I get the exact text that we agreed
Yeah.
to.
Thanks,
I
Brandon.
will, I will get those PRs submitted. I will drop notes in the Slack, and then we
I'd be
can-
more comfortable if you push it, Brandon. You've done the majority of the changes to the distribution spec, and you understand this. You have more context on it than I do with respect to all the other changes you made. So I think
I just don't want to steal anybody's fun. If people like to submit PRs, and especially
this
if
should
they
be-
want
Not
to
This
get
week,
merged
not
quick.
this week, Brandon, not this week. I'm totally burnt out this week. I would have. I promise. I'm really burnt out this week. But I do want to see this through somehow. That's more
I'll
than
get those two PRs submitted up there, drop notes in Slack, and then as soon as we get those merged, let's start working on discussions for the GA release.
Yeah, that sounds great.
all right.
this was productive.
Thanks,
Mike,
guys.
I understand where you're coming from. So
I stress out over this stuff.
we want to get this through. We're here. Let's do this.
All right.
All right.
Take your time,
Thanks,
folks.
everybody. Have a
Thank
great
Thanks,
rest of the week.
everyone.
Yeah.
See ya.